What if you wanted to play a dwarf in Dungeons & Dragons, but you didn't want to play a dwarf? Well, the people at Wizards of the Coast thankfully thought about this for D&D 5th edition, and they gave us the Belt of Dwarven Kind. This belt, no matter what, is going to give you a +2 to your Constitution score to a maximum of 20, and make it so you're better at talking to dwarves. Additionally, you have a 50% chance to grow a beard every day at dawn, and you gain a bunch of other dwarven racial features. This item is great if you're a dwarf, it's great if you're not a dwarf. Any boost to Constitution and therefore your health is good. Being able to grow a beard randomly is hilarious. And of course, if you're a race that doesn't have dark vision or resistance to poison, then what's not to love about this item? The way I like to visualize it is that you are getting the benefits of your race, plus the benefits of another race, plus an added +2 to your Constitution score. And when you think about it that way, it should be no surprise that the Belt of Dwarven Kind sits right here at spot number 60 on this list. But following this up is an item that kills the most dreaded enemy in all of D&D instantly. Now you might be thinking, is he talking about a beholder, a dragon, a Tarask, Tiamat? No, I'm talking about doors. If you've played a game in 5th edition, you know that doors can single-handedly stop even the most powerful D&D parties. And so if your players constantly struggle to open doors, then why not invest in the Chime of Opening? This little chime that can be used 10 times can open any door, really any object. As an action, you just point it at an object that needs opening, like a door or a lock or a lid, and then it opens if the sound reaches the object. It undoes one latch or lock at a time, and once the chime is rung 10 times, it is destroyed. So technically this item is limited. And yes, on stealth missions, the chime can have some downsides and drawbacks. But again, doors opened instantly without a spell slot. This item doesn't even need attunement. I think that speaks for itself, really. If you want something open and you can't get it open, use the chime to get it open. It's a get out of jail free card, really. I think that quite literally any D&D party would want this chime, just in their back pocket. And again, since it requires no attunement slot, any D&D character can pick it up and use it. Which is why it's here at spot number 59 on this list. And following up the chime, at number 58 are the Boots of Speed. Activated with the bonus action, the Boots of Speed double your walking speed, and any creature that makes an opportunity attack against you has disadvantage. No matter if you're a martial character or a mage, if you attack at ranged or up close in melee, the Boots of Speed can help you. If you're a melee character, one of the biggest things that can stop you from doing damage is not being able to get into melee. Don't you hate it when the enemy wizard is more than 30 feet away from you? Fear not, you don't need to waste your action to dash up to them. Instead, use a bonus action, double your movement speed, and get up into range. And the disadvantage on all attacks of opportunity certainly makes this easier. Now, if you're a range damage dealer or a spellcaster, the last thing you want is to get into melee distance with an enemy. So as a bonus action, you can double your speed and get out of there. That doubled speed means that an enemy can therefore not catch up to you on their subsequent turn. And the disadvantage with the attack of opportunity makes it more likely that you're not going to get hit. If you're in a D&D group that runs very tactical combats, the Boots of Speed are going to help you tremendously. And even if you're in a more role-playing centric group, how many times has your party or your character needed to rush to get somewhere quickly, when you want to get there in half the amount of time? Look, Sonic the Hedgehog has it right. Going fast is good. And therefore the Boots of Speed come in at spot number 58. And following this great magic item up is the Sword of Sharpness. At spot 57, the Sword of Sharpness is a very rare item. Now, to the untrained eye, you might be thinking, why is the Sword of Sharpness so good? It doesn't have any bonus to hit or to damage. I mean, it has a bonus to damage against objects, but why is it so good? Well, you do an extra 14 points of slashing damage when you roll a 20 on an attack roll, and then you can roll another d20. And if you roll a 20 again, you lop off one of the target's limbs. I know an extra 14 damage doesn't seem like a lot initially, but have you ever rolled poorly on a critical hit and actually rolled below the damage of a non-critical hit? Like you do 7 damage on a critical, and your next attack you do 9 damage on a non-critical. Well, with the Sword of Sharpness, you're not in any danger of that happening to you. That extra 14 damage is powerful. It's the equivalent of a whole extra attack. And then, of course, you have the small chance of lopping off a limb. And we do have to take that into account, because while it does not happen very often, in those magical moments, it still does happen. It's always a memorable moment when you're able to just lop off a random limb with a Sword of Sharpness. Players will talk about the event for years afterward, even if it's just a simple goblin. But I've had a player use a Sword of Sharpness and lop off the arm of a Baylor during combat. And that's one of the best moments I've ever been a part of as a DM. And so, for those reasons, the Sword of Sharpness is coming in at spot 57 on the list. And up next is one of my own personal favorite items. At number 56, another very rare magic item, the Rod of Absorption. The Rod of Absorption is twofold. Firstly, it's a battery for you as a spellcaster. The Rod of Absorption can hold up to 50 spell levels within it. That's a lot of spells. And you can use those spell levels to power your own magic. That's fantastic. That's great. However, its second ability allows you to absorb a spell cast at you. A spell that's only targeting you. But there are a lot of spells that do that, a lot of dangerous spells that do that. And the best thing is, there's no save. With a Rod of Absorption, you can eat a hold person, a disintegrate, a power word kill. Even a counterspell can technically be eaten with a Rod of Absorption because the counterspell is targeting you, the spellcaster. It is an instant I win button versus another spellcaster. So why isn't this item higher? Well, in those very few situations, man, it's really cooking. But how often are you fighting a spellcaster that's targeting a single target spell at you? If you're in a big party especially, you're probably getting hit with fireballs or circle of deaths or lots of area of effect magic. There are limited situations in which you can actually use the reaction, so that decreases its power a little bit. Also, at later levels, the Rod of Absorption starts being not as effective because you can only pull a 5th level spell out of the item. So if you want to cast something like Teleport, which is a 7th level spell, you can't actually do that. So that's another constraining factor on the actual item. Now don't get me wrong, it is terrific. And the ability to cast low level spells without fear that you're going to run out of spell slots or not have a spell slot that you need is great. But I can tell you from experience, it's not as broken as you would originally think. Again, don't get me wrong, super powerful. If you have a spellcaster who's constantly running out of spell slots, consider flipping this item to them. Especially if they're a little bit weaker than all the other characters in the party. Maybe they're a new player or something like that. In my opinion, this is one of the best balanced magic items in all of 5th edition. I think the abilities are powerful, but they're also limited in just the right ways to not make them broken. I think it deserves the very rare rarity because you don't want to see Rods of Absorption around everywhere. However, when you get it, it's enough of a boon that it deserves that rarity. It's a magic item that really changes the way that you play without breaking the overall power scaling between characters. It rewards thoughtful use without making it so one player shoots ahead of the rest of the party and makes others feel obsolete. I hope that moving into the future we see more design like this. And for that reason, the Rod of Absorption is sitting pretty at spot 56. But next up, this is a must-have item for all barbarians and monks, in my opinion. If you're a character that doesn't wear any armor, the bracers of defense are invaluable. This is one of the few ways that characters who don't wear armor can actually increase their AC. And usually the +2 bonus brings them in line with all the other frontline fighters in the party, at least if you're a barbarian or a monk, who are the main 2 classes that are going to make use of this item. It's hard for me to say anything else other than this is just really strong. And while I do recommend that barbarians and monks go after this item specifically, other users, like wizards, can make a lot of use out of this. Combine bracers of defense with mage armor and you have a pretty tanky wizard or sorcerer. The bracers of defense though are below other items that give a +2 to AC because you're already at an AC disadvantage when you need them. If you're a wizard or a sorcerer, you shouldn't really be caring about your AC that much because you shouldn't be getting hit. You need to stay out of the front and midline and get to safety. And if you're a barbarian, you should have many defensive capabilities to keep you in the fight. You usually have the hit points to take those hits. And monk, well, the monk it's just a mess of a class, but I suppose that you do have dodge and disengage as a bonus action, although it's fueled by key points. You shouldn't be getting hit all that much as well as a monk. You're not really a frontline fighter, but you're not really a midline fighter. You're a striker. It's weird. Pretty much, if you need this item, you're already at a bit of a disadvantage, and AC probably shouldn't be your first priority, but if you are in a situation where you can boost your AC, it's still always nice. And Lord knows that if you're a barbarian or a monk who is getting hit all the time, you do want a small boost to your AC. And so for that reason, at spot 55, we have the Bracers of Defense. But leapfrogging these bracers, at spot 54, we have the Wand of Magic Missiles. The Wand of Magic Missiles is an uncommon item that has 7 charges. For each charge that you use to cast the Magic Missile spell that this wand provides, you increase the spell's level by 1. Now, why is this uncommon wand that at maximum allows you to cast Magic Missile at 7th level so high up on the list? Well, because it requires attunement, but it doesn't specify a spellcaster. One of the banes of a lot of melee characters is that if a creature's flying or is out of their range, they can't do anything. Well, this uncommon magic item gives them the ability to no matter what deal damage at range. This damage isn't going to miss, it's always going to hit, doesn't scale off of any other modifier. It's simple, easy to use, and a good fix. Why would I force my fighter to use a javelin when I can just give them this wand? I promise you, if you're in a campaign when you are constantly fighting enemies that stay out of your range, you are going to want this magic item. It's well worth the attunement slot. Or if you don't need it, you can just give it to an NPC follower, no matter what skill level they are, and have them just cast Magic Missile throughout the combat. It's a one-size-fits-all, good damage-dealing weapon. You're not going to compete for damage with dedicated range damage dealers, however you don't need to. This is going to allow you to do respectable damage no matter what. And it's that versatility combined with its uncommon status that puts it here at spot 54. Instead of using javelins, go after this item. But next up, we have another flying item, and this is the Carpet of Flying. You know what's better than flying alone? Flying with friends. Depending on its size, the Carpet of Flying can lift up to 800 pounds into the air. The bigger the carpet, the slower it is, but group flying is powerful. You'd be shocked at how many characters in the monster manual don't have a way to attack flying creatures. If you're just traveling along the landscape, and you're at 3rd level and you see a Tarask running at you, all you need to do is go 60 feet up into the air and you win. You beat the Tarask. It doesn't have any way to deal ranged damage. In a dungeon, is this going to be as helpful? No, but for long distance traveling, the Carpet of Flying is great because it has no limit to the time it can stay in the air while flying. Since the carpet does not need attunement, you could technically have people alternate flying the carpet the entire trip. And as the item says, it can technically carry double its carrying weight. It's just that the carpet is going to fly at half speed. So if you have a party of 4, you can definitely get away with a smaller carpet and still use it to fly across your campaign world. It makes traveling safer, easier, and also DMs, if you don't want to have to plan random encounters and can just handwave combat to you get there, just give them a Carpet of Flying. And you might say, well, I don't want to give them infinite flying everywhere. I say that's fine. Your campaign world can have these little way stations along the road that basically allow these carpets to fly along them, but if you're off-road, then they don't work. Just a little bit of world building can solve the problem pretty quickly. But just as the Bag of Holding just helps with the day-to-day logistics of D&D, so does the Carpet of Flying. After, say, 5th or 6th level, when the party is beginning to journey out of their local area, I highly recommend giving them the Carpet of Flying. Don't give the carpet too late, like around 13th level, because then they're going to have access to lots of teleportation magic, and then they're not going to need to use the Carpet of Flying, and it's just going to sit idle. But because of all the use that the Carpet of Flying can give, it sits at spot 53 on this list. And next up on the list, if you're ready to be afraid, is the Mace of Terror. And this mace is very simple. You spend an action, and every creature of your choice within 30 feet needs to make a wisdom saving throw or be frightened of you. And while frightened in this way, the creature can't take reactions, and it must use its action to dash away from you on its turns. Why is the Mace of Terror so good? Because the Mace of Terror swings the action economy in your favor. Because yes, the Mace of Terror might only work for 1 turn on some creatures, but that's 1 turn when they're not attacking you. Since most D&D combats only last for about 3 rounds, this is a significant swing in the tempo of the combat. You can theoretically quote-unquote outnumber an enemy that has superior numbers to you with the Mace of Terror for 1 turn. But really, if you're fighting creatures with terrible wisdom saves, this can last for multiple rounds. And in many situations, the Mace of Terror can give you additional attacks because the creatures can only take the dash action. They can't take the disengage action, opening them up to attacks of opportunities. With a high wisdom save DC and a powerful effect, the Mace of Terror can quite literally save parties from impossible combats. Don't underestimate the power of this item to completely swing the tides of battle in your favor. If you have the chance to pick up the Mace of Terror, do it. You never know when you're going to need the ability to send your enemies screaming for the hills. But now let's transition from an item that is going to magically terrify your enemies to an item that's going to terrify your enemies based on the amount of damage you'll be able to do to them. At least if their name's on the ammo. Because at spot 51, we have the Arrow of Slaying. Surprise, we actually have more ammunition on this list. But it's very, very special ammunition that I had to do a lot of research on to confirm some theories about it. So arrows of slaying are built to slay very specific things. They can be as broad or specific as the DM wants, but if a target belongs to the specific group that the arrow of slaying is biased against, then they have to make a DC 17 Constitution saving throw when they're hit, or take 6d10 damage when they're struck, or half as much on a successful save. So no matter what, you're doing more damage. And better yet, this ammunition does not stop being magical once it's fired. It stops being magical when it deals the extra damage. So if you're fighting a dragon, you have 3 arrows of slaying, and you recover all the arrows that you missed and you keep firing, you are always going to be able to output 18d10 damage. Now, this damage might be halved if the dragon is saving, but that's still a lot of damage. And if you're prepared with arrows of slaying as you're going into a big fight, you can absolutely eradicate your chosen enemies. But why are the arrows of slaying here? They're very rare magic items, so aren't they rare? Yes and no. So if you're in a homebrew game, run and written by your DM, arrows of slaying are alright. You don't really know if they're going to be useful. Hopefully your DM throws enemies at you that can be hurt by the arrows of slaying, but honestly, who knows? Now let's look at written adventures and Adventures League modules. I went through and I looked for instances of the arrows of slaying, and sure enough, without fail, when they appear in the modules, you are getting ready to fight that creature which the arrows can affect. And you're usually getting a lot of these arrows, like 10 arrows. So in pre-written adventures, the arrows of slaying are pretty much always going to be useful. Since a lot of players play in these types of games, in pretty much every example, the arrows of slaying are going to be useful, and you're being given a lot of them. Now, I didn't go through and I didn't do this with every single item on this list, of course. But when looking at this particular consumable magic item, you're pretty much always going to find some use in them, at least in the pre-written stuff. And even if the game is from your DM's mind and creation, you can probably still find uses for these arrows. And because they're on very, very few random roll tables, they're pretty much always going to be tailored for what's going next. And the damage is just so good. They can completely reorient to combat, because 3 arrows of slaying on average should be doing about 99 damage. With most things like dragons having about 150 to 200 hit points, that is a massive swing. So because of the raw power that the Arrow of Slaying possesses, yeah, I feel distinctly confident at placing it at spot 51 on this list. But what if an Arrow of Slaying isn't enough for you? What if you're going into a fight and really need some good combat tactics? Well then, I suggest checking out this video right here. It should help you get better at combat. And thank you for entering the dungeon.